Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Parkour. I'm Brian Parks, and in this video I want to continue the two-part series that I started yesterday on code reviews, and specifically in the context of pull requests and merge requests. So yesterday I talked about if you're working as a solo developer, why would you still want to do merge requests, pull requests, code reviews, that sort of thing. If you're the only person working on the project, you're reviewing your own code. You're not reviewing someone else's code. So why would you do it, and how would you do it? In this video, I want to talk about the usual case that we find ourselves in, where you're working as a team and you are asking for a code review from someone else on your team. I'm not going to cover the why. There are lots of different reasons why, but that's pretty well covered in multiple other forums. What I want to talk about is specifically who you choose to review your code, and then what you should be looking for when you're reviewing someone else's code, or what they should be looking at when they're reviewing your code. So first up, who should you choose to review your code? Think back to what I mentioned in the last video about what you're looking for. You're looking to see if every change that you made sense, and if you can explain it, right? So ideally, you'd be looking for someone who can do the same sort of thing, someone who understands the code. If it's a large code base, maybe someone who understands the specific area of code that you're in, and has some context on both, whether or not they would do they would have implemented the feature the same way, which I will say, I had a code review the other day. I sent it to one of my teammates, and he said that I did everything exactly the same way that he would have, and he's very diligent, very rigorous in his treatment of things, very scientific, and so for me that was a high compliment. If you can get to that point, that's fantastic. But in any event, show your code to someone who is familiar enough with the code base so that they can spot either things that might not be accounting for all situations that the code has to handle, or potentially even other areas of the code that mirror where you've made your changes. Because one thing that you don't see in code reviews is the code that you didn't change. And that's not something that everybody who looks at the code review is going to know. If you look at the diff, you can obviously see what changed, and you can see if that makes sense. But if there's another piece of code that also needs to change in a similar way, or to handle something related, you're obviously not going to see that in the code in the diff on the code review. So having someone who's familiar with that area of code and what it's doing and why it's doing it is paramount, above and beyond everything else. Now, what should you be looking for when you do a code review? Obviously, everything I already mentioned, but some specific things that you should be thinking about when working as a team is future readability, both by you and by other people. Can not just in the context of the diff, but in the context of 3 months from now, when someone picks up this piece of code and wants to add a feature to it or fix a bug, not that those are in your code, but are they going to be able to look at this code and understand what's going on, what both you and the other developers around you have done in the code? Will it make sense? The other things to look at are potentially things like security. If you're focused on web application security, look for opportunities for SQL injection, cross-site scripting, those sorts of things. We can talk about them in a future video. I might already have a video where I talk about web application security. If I do, I'll leave it down in the link below. If I don't, topic for a future video. Other things to look for are things that might create future mistakes. So things like repeated code, or really long method signatures, really convoluted return objects. I'm thinking JavaScript here because it's what I'm writing a lot of recently. You can basically ad hoc construct an object and return it, and if it's a small object, that's fine. If it's a large object, you really have to communicate very well with the calling areas and make sure that they know what that object's going to look like, or have really good tooling around it. And even really good tooling isn't a guarantee, but those sorts of things. You should be looking at not only, do I think this works, do I think this accomplishes what the ticket is asking for, but also, is this the best way to do it, at least right now? You don't want to get into the situation where you're talking about over-engineering things and anticipating all possible problems, because let's be upfront. You are never going to anticipate all possible problems and requirements changes. Start with the ones you know about, and if there's one that you think is pretty obvious, like, yeah, people are going to ask for this next, then maybe account for it. Don't necessarily implement it, because if you don't have a consumer, you really have no way if it's working. But at least don't paint yourself into a corner, and think through those sorts of things as you do more code reviews. Now, depending on how your organization is set up, you might have specific code reviews that you do, and you might be kind of eased into doing code reviews. But my recommendation is to do as many code reviews as you possibly can. Even if you aren't the actual approver, or you don't click a checkbox or something like that, look at people's merge requests, pull requests, code reviews, whatever you do, especially if you're either a junior developer or new to a company. Because looking at merge requests are kind of small, scaled down ways to see what the code is doing, what the project is doing. You can look at the ticket that the merge request or pull request is written in response to, so you can see the context, right? What are we trying to accomplish with this code? And then you can look at the code and see if you understand why this code accomplishes that ticket. Hopefully there are comments. If there's discussions amongst the reviewers and the original author, that's even better, because that can help explain, maybe why they did something, why something looks a little bit different from what someone else might have done, but why it's really the way to go. And don't be afraid to put your own comments and questions on there, especially if it's within your team. Outside of your team, that might raise some eyebrows. Again, not an issue, but you want to make sure that you're not pulling people's time away from doing productive work, and hopefully your team, especially if you're a junior developer or new to the company, either situation really, hopefully your team has been given the responsibility to help onboard you. That's really what they're there for, and that really should be expected at any company. So especially pull requests, code reviews on your own team, definitely take a look at them, learn from them, ask questions, and you'll get better. Both as a coder, you'll understand the software better, and in my experience, doing that has helped me understand kind of the unspoken conventions and maybe even code standards at a particular organization. Some organizations have them written down, some don't, but either way, there's a specific way that developers do things, and I always try to make it a goal when I'm creating pull requests. So I know that I'm going to get comments on my first pull request. It's kind of it's going to happen, unless it's like a super simple change where the change is obvious, which I hope that's not my first pull request at a company. That doesn't really get me a good understanding of the software. But my first pull request with some actual meat on it, I would expect to get some comments. Oh, use this utility over here that, obviously that's not part of, Lodash or something like that, but it's something that we wrote that is pretty common within our code base, and it makes these sorts of things easier, more readable, that sort of thing. Okay, yeah, obviously being a new guy, I wouldn't know that, it's good to get exposed to A, where those utilities live, and B, a utility to use in this particular situation. So that's cool. But then I try to make it a goal to, after a month or so, try to get my pull requests to the point where they don't have many, if any, comments. Maybe it's like, oh, you added an extra semicolon here, or you accidentally typed a 1 for somehow. I don't know how it happens, but I've seen it creep into pull requests, excess characters and that sort of thing. Minor things that are like, yeah, I should have caught that. It's, it's not major. It's not going to drastically affect the functionality of the application, but yeah, it's something that I should take out. In fact, just the other day on one of my pull requests, I left a debugger statement in there. Obviously, I was debugging in the console, and one of my less experienced developers was the reviewer on that ticket, and obviously he caught that immediately. But that's the sort of thing, like, well, I mean, I know he looked at the ticket. I know he looked at the pull request, and that's awesome. That means, yes, that was low-hanging fruit, but he read through the code, and I know he's learning from what I'm doing, and that's awesome. That's one of my goals in making these pull requests. So, at this point, I'm rambling. I should probably just close the video. There are a lot more topics that we could go into on merge requests, pull requests, code reviews in general, anything that I talked about. So if there's anything specific you want me to do a whole video on, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your comments, respond to them, do future videos specifically to topics you request in the future. But yeah, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can get more like this, and like the video, and I'll see you tomorrow.